Welcome into the LSU Sports Insider Podcast for Wednesday, February the 26th. I'm Zach Ewing with Advocate LSU baseball beat writer Koki Riley. And we are actually recording this on Tuesday because Koki's got to drive up to the Dallas area for LSU's big week up there.
Yeah, it's that nice six and a half hour drive. You've probably done it plenty of times, Zach.
Few times. I got a good lunch spot in Shreveport if you need it.
Yeah.
Actually, it's already lunchtime, so that's probably not going to work. dinner spot in Shreveport, maybe.
Yeah.
Look, this is LSU's first big week of the season, and we're going to talk about this later in the show. Kind of big picture stuff first, and then we'll zero in on the week to come. But they're going to have their opportunity to make their mark here.
Yeah, absolutely. With Dallas Baptist on Wednesday, they're a top 20 team in the country. Then they faced Kansas State, which beat Arkansas last week, and then they face Nebraska, who was ranked to start the year and has a win over Vanderbilt. So these are not easy teams. You know, they're really going to have to show up for these games on both sides of the ball. So it's going to be a really interesting challenge for this team coming up this weekend.
Yep, no doubt about it. So quickly to recap what happened to LSU last week, they went 3-1, suffered their first loss of the season to Omaha. They did take 2 out of 3 from the Mavericks. They also beat Southern earlier in the week and had the Nichols game postponed among all the rain we got.
And then they won last night against Nichols. So
yeah, won again last night. So now 4-1 basically, and 7-1 on the season.
Yeah, 7-1
on the season.
The year.
Which, look, you want to win every game, especially against a lower conference team like Omaha. But the truth of the matter is, it doesn't work like that in college baseball. Texas A&M was number 1 in the country. They lost to Cal Poly. LSU stayed at number 2 in the rankings. I think Tennessee's undefeated behind them, but it's only a matter of time Tennessee will lose a game too. You don't win them all in baseball.
Yeah. That's part of it for sure, and I think one of the reasons why LSU went up in the rankings, actually the D1 baseball rankings, was because Virginia has 3 losses already, so they're 3-3. They've had a much tougher schedule, but still. But I mean, we'll get into the specifics of why they lost and what kind of went haywire for a few innings there. But again, they were going to lose one of these games at some point. So it was the way they've responded since then has been fairly promising, especially from an offensive standpoint. But we can get into the details in a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a quick 30-second break, and we will be back on the LSU Sports Insider talking LSU baseball right after this.
There's no better place to parlay than Caesars Sportsbook. With quick picks, you can tap right into pre-built, ready-to-bet parlays right from the home screen. And if you miss tip-off, no worries. You can play same-game parlays live during the action. Plus, it's never been easier to find and bet on the biggest matchups of the day, so you can keep up with all the action. Caesars Sportsbook, proud partner of the NBA and the only sportsbook app with Caesars Rewards. Download it today.
Welcome back to the LSU Insider. Zach Ewing with Koki Riley here. Hope you subscribe to the LSU Tigers at NOLA.com YouTube channel. It's a mouthful, but I'm sure you could find it. Hopefully you're watching this already on YouTube. If you are, subscribe to the channel. Sign up for notifications. You'll get news whenever we go live. We're going to have SEC tournament basketball previews next week. Spring football preview. Spring football starts, I think, a week from Saturday. So it doesn't slow down really until LSU baseball is done, whenever that might be.
Yeah, sometime in June, most likely. So,
yeah. So then it'll slow down a little bit, but then we'll be gearing up for football. So sign up for those notifications. Hit the like button while you're down there. We appreciate you doing that. It does make a difference to us. Going to talk big picture LSU baseball now. What have we learned over these first 8 games, Koki? Starting on the pitching side, and the highlight, I think, has been the performance of the freshmen, the four freshmen of the apocalypse, as opposing hitters may start to call them.
Yeah, these 4 freshmen, Casan Evans, Cooper Williams, the lefty, Mavrick Rizy, and William Schmidt, they've thrown 17 innings so far this season. They've allowed 1 earned run combined. They've just been as good as advertised so far to start the season. I mean, part of it is it definitely should be noted that they're not facing the toughest of competition so far this season, but there were high expectations for these guys heading into the year, and there was definitely a feeling that they could have big roles out of the bullpen for this team immediately, and so far that's been exactly the case. And they've really limited the walks, all 4 of these guys, and William Schmidt had to start last night against Nichols. Gave him 5 hits, and I think Nichols did a good job of sort of jumping on his fastball early in counts. But once he was able to mix in sort of his off-speed pitches a little bit more, mixing that big curveball, he's got 4 pretty strong offerings. So he was able to really settle in after that. And again, like these 4 guys have just been really as good as you could ever hope for them to be. And again, it's just been a very, very impressive start to the year for these guys.
Yeah, and they're different pitchers too. It's not like you're throwing the same guy out there. It gives LSU a lot of depth. I think Jay Johnson is still sort of, along with the rest of us, learning a little bit about this team. There's a lot of newcomers on this team, particularly on that pitching staff. He's got to be thrilled. Again, lower competition, but what you want to see against lower competition is domination, and this pitching staff is dominated, especially these freshmen.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of go through the list with the specifics of each guy, I mean, William Schmidt was, as probably everyone who's listening to this knows, was supposed to be a first-round pick, supposed to get millions of dollars to go off to Major League Baseball, and decided to come to LSU instead. He's from Baton Rouge, and he's got a fastball in the mid to upper 90s, has one of the best curveballs maybe in the country, and at least on this team. And he throws strikes. I don't think he had a walk last night, for example. And I think they're going to use him in a sort of a longer relief, potential midweek sort of starter role. There's some things you'd like to see ironed out a little bit when it comes to being able to locate the ball inside to right-handed hitters. Wasn't really doing a fantastic job of that against Nichols, and the fastball is a little bit flat, so he kind of needs to locate that pitch pretty well, because it's not a darting, moving fastball the same way as a Mavrick Rizy or Chase Shores has. So just 2 things to sort of keep an eye out for him. You could see him play, maybe having kind of a similar role that Kate Anderson had last year, again, where he started a lot of midweek games, but he also came out of the bullpen in spurts. So I think you could see that for him. And
a guy like that, just to interrupt real quick, it becomes hugely important in the postseason.
Yes.
Because you're going to need that 4th guy, and the guy who's used to soaking up some innings. You're going to need him multiple times probably. Yeah,
absolutely. And especially when you get to like the postseason and the SEC tournament, where you're playing so many games, so many days, you need guys who have length, who can pitch in those sort of bigger moments. And he's kind of set up perfectly to fill that sort of role. And in a regional where you're playing, 5 or 6 games, and in just 5 days. So
yeah, it's the SEC tournament, it's the regional, and then hopefully Omaha, are the times when you're going to need that extra pitching. So.
Exactly. So he's overqualified for that role. I want to be clear about that. Like, if he was on this team in 2022, when they were really struggling to find any starting pitching, he would have been like the Friday night guy. Like that's how far this program has come with its pitching since Jay Johnson first arrived. So you have him, and I think his role again is a little bit different than what the other 3 guys are going to do. Cooper Williams, Mavrick Rizy, and Casan Evans. Evans and Rizy are kind of perfectly set in these late inning, short spurt relief roles, where Evans, I think, is going to have more 2-inning appearances. You've already seen that a little bit so far this season. His fastball's up to 99 miles an hour. He's got a really, really good slider to pair with it. Works at a really quick tempo, more or less throw strikes, and that's a guy that they're really going to rely on out of the bullpen in these high leverage spots. Mavrick Rizy, same thing. Jay Johnson said last night that Rizy might end up leading the team in appearances this season. That's how much they're going to really trust him out of the bullpen. He's kind of similar to Chase Shores in a way when Shores was coming out, because he's 6'9". He's even taller than Shores is. Shores is 6'8". He's 6'9". His fastball's up to 97. It moves. It's a lot of movement with that pitch, and he pairs it with a pretty good slider. I don't see him really going having a lot of multi-inning relief appearances, because he really only has 2 pitches. Rizy, when I'm just with Rizy, but I think that you're going to see him a lot of 1-inning spurts. You're going to see him, twice in a weekend sort of guy. He's going to be huge for this team. And Cooper Williams is important because he's a lefty, and this team doesn't have a lot of lefties out of the bullpen. So he has an important role carved out for him just through that alone.
Yeah, these freshmen, we mentioned 17 innings, 2 runs, 1 earned, 7 hits, 1 walk, 24 strikeouts.
Yeah.
They all have a whip under 1. In fact, the worst whip of the bunch is William Schmidt at 0.84.
It's really good. Still really good.
And again, it's Omaha. It's Indiana, Purdue, Fort Wayne. It's Nichols. I mean, we don't want to get carried away.
Yeah.
But that's what you want to see against those teams. And the weather's going to get warmer and the competition's going to get better. And they're probably going to give up some hits and some runs this weekend even. But and not just the freshmen, but the pitching staff in general has been utterly dominant, which is great to see because that's what can really drag a team down in college baseball.
Because but also like if you're throwing strikes, you're throwing strikes, and if it's 97 with sink, it's 97 with sink. You know, with the case of that's just Mavrick Rizy, and he wasn't even as high profile of a guy as William Schmidt. Like everybody in the country knows who William Schmidt is. If you follow college baseball or you follow youth baseball at the upper levels at all, right? But like Casan Evans and Mavrick Rizy, like people weren't really talking about those guys as they were coming to school. Like those were the typical impressive freshmen coming in. But
yeah, and I mean, like that is as impressive as it gets because you talk about freshmen and the thing I worry about is walks, right? Like, and I'll just repeat that. In 17 innings, they have 1 walk, 1 hit batter. They're throwing strikes, they're attacking hitters, and that's when you can do that with the stuff that you're talking about.
Yeah,
that's tremendous.
Yeah, absolutely. And they all fit their own little role. And I don't know. There's just this is a really good feeling about these guys heading into as we head into this sort of big week. And it's kind of unheralded to have 4 freshmen who are almost certainly going to have roles when we get into conference play.
Yeah, it'll be. I'm super excited to see how they do this weekend. But the pitching staff's been dominant. On the other hand, as we continue here on the LSU Sports Insider podcast, talking Tiger baseball. The hitting, and we had some stats from the IUPUFW Alphabet Soup series that they were utterly dominant, and the overall numbers still look good. They still scored 12 runs against Omaha on Sunday, and then 13 against Nichols yesterday. There was a stretch, the last 3 innings of Friday night game, which was a kind of a close, hard-fought 4-2 victory. And then especially the first 8 innings in Saturday's game where LSU did not have a hit for those 8 innings. They had 11 straight scoreless innings.
They had a 1 hit with 2 outs in the 8th.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Finally
so 7 and 2/3. They did break it up in the 8th. And then they woke up and actually almost won the game Saturday, scored 4 runs in the 9th inning, lost 5-4. So I don't want to panic over 11 innings because this is baseball. Like you go through these slumps and streaks and things, and it can be contagious. Was there anything in that stretch that worries you long term?
It's hard to say because they're not going to face that sort of pitching or that level of competition outside of midweek games, and maybe they were just pressing too much and being over aggressive at the plate, which I think is just true, and that sort of led to their struggles. But it was a little worrying because you kind of saw stuff like this happen last year a little bit. Maybe not in the no hit for 7 2/3 innings sort of bad, but they had a 2-1 loss at one point. I think to Xavier, they had a 5-2 loss to Stony Brook. The offense. There were times where the offense definitely was an issue during non-conference play, and it happened more than just a couple times. And then that sort of translated to conference play where the offense really didn't have enough to support a pitching staff that all of a sudden started struggling once you got to conference play.
Right.
This year though, there's been, I'd say so overall, there's probably been more consistency than what we saw last year with the offense, but there's still been a lot of, but still that stretch still should scare you if you're an LSU fan, just because, when you have as much talent as they do and as much versatility as they do offensively, like stretches like that are I don't say inexcusable because again it's baseball and weird stuff happens, but to be no hit by Omaha through 7 2/3 innings, it's hard to sort of wave away a little bit,
I would say you wait and see if this starts to happen a little more regularly. The one encouraging sign to me, Koki, is that they were still getting free bases in that stretch.
Yeah.
And to me, like, okay, when you're playing fantasy baseball, one thing you look at, okay, this hitter has struggled over the last couple of weeks. Go and look at how many times he struck out versus walked. If those numbers are still good, chances are he's going to come out of it. And for LSU, they had the bases loaded. I think first inning and third inning in that game.
First and the second inning, they had the bases loaded,
and just on walks and hit batters.
Yeah.
So like, It's not like they weren't seeing the ball well. I mean, I think they were hitting into some outs that maybe you get a little bit unlucky that those balls don't find holes. But
at one point they flew out on 7 straight at bats, and I think they had like 11 flyouts or pop outs in the first 4 innings or something crazy like that.
The pop outs will kill you. The flyouts you'll take because there's power.
But they were like
involved,
lazy flyouts.
Yeah.
So there wasn't really a hard hit ball until that 8th inning. Or there might have been like 1 or 2 in the 7th or 8th, but like it took a while for them to even like square a ball up. So it was rough. But like those walks, the vast majority of those walks were in the first 2 innings when they loaded the bases in both those innings. But they just couldn't get that extra hit, and you just sort of figured that they're going to get to this guy eventually. He doesn't have very good command, and then that starter got through the 3rd and then got 2 outs in the 4th, and that starter, I'm blanking on his name right now, but he had one of the strangest box score lines that I've ever seen. I think it was 3 2/3 innings, no strikeouts, no hits, and like
7 walks or whatever it was.
4 or 5, or at least 4 or 5 walks. It was insane.
You let him off the hook.
They let him
off the hook
yeah.
is what you did.
Yeah.
And that's, you hate to see that. But again, they play 56 of these things just in the regular season. It's going to happen. There's going to be a frustrating Friday night, Saturday afternoon against a top pitcher in the SEC where they can't get anything going. They lose 3-1 and everybody's wringing their hand. It happens. So I wouldn't be too concerned about it. I do like the way LSU responded. I like that 9th inning. You had a chance to win the game. And then obviously scoring 12 runs Sunday, 13 runs Monday is a big deal. And individually, like, look, if you look at some of these individual numbers, they're all still fine. Stephen Milam rebounded from kind of a rough first weekend. He had a good weekend. Michael Braswell's the one guy who's still not really hitting yet. You'd like to see him get going.
Yeah.
He's a guy who
Tanner Reeves has started in his spot the last two games at third base and leading off actually in those games. And Reeves hasn't really hit the ball that hard, but he's walking a ton. And that's the thing, he did pretty well during the preseason as well. So I don't know. That'll be interesting to see what that might. There might actually be a third base competition now between him and Braswell. And even John Pearson got an at bat last night when the game was somewhat still in the balance against a left-handed reliever. So it's third base is. I mean, we thought it was going to be kind of a question mark heading into the season, given that they never really got someone to replace Tommy White's spot. But now with Reeves not just starting once, but starting in back-to-back games, it's definitely going to be something to keep an eye out for. As we march along here.
Braswell, I still think long term he's probably the guy you want to win that job. Is that? Do you think that's right? I mean, he had 300 last year. He had a good postseason for him last year.
Yeah.
He's not going to hit for a ton of power or anything. He's not your traditional third base slugger. But I think he's probably got the highest ceiling there.
They're probably better defensively with him there too, because like Reeves isn't a natural third baseman. I don't even know what his natural position is because he can play so many different positions. I mean, we'll see what's going to go on at third base. I think they wanted Reeves in there the last 2 days because of how well he's been able to get on base, and he also had a single to sort of start that rally in the 9th inning the other night. And he also mentioned Milam. Like Milam's 5 for his last 6 at the plate, and he's been ripping the ball. So
he'll be fine.
I think he'll be fine. Yeah,
he'll be fine. He had one slow weekend in February. He'll be fine. Just to kind of put this in perspective, as a team, and again, competition hasn't been the best, but you worry about an 11-inning stretch. But even including that 11-inning stretch where they didn't hit the ball worth a lick, this team has a .498 slugging percentage, a .469 on-base percentage, 58 walks with 17 hit batters. That's 75 free passes versus only 41 walks.
41 strikeouts.
Yes, thank you. 41 strikeouts. So I'll repeat that. 58 walks, 17 hit batters, so 75 free passes versus 41 strikeouts. They're doing just fine.
Yeah. I mean, as as they need to be, right? Because like you need to sort of dominate these sort of teams, and I mean maybe you lose a game here or there like they have so far. 1-2 would be kind of a lot given the teams that they're facing. Like one loss, you can kind of get away with it. But like you want to see them, winning games in 7 innings. String together these big innings. Like what last night they scored 7 runs with 2 outs. Like that's the sort of stuff that you kind of want to see as you go into a weekend like this in Texas.
I will ask before we get into that weekend. One of your preseason concerns about this team was where does the power come from? Mm-hmm. They have 7 homers in 8 games. So that's less than 1 per game. Again, against lesser competition.
Yeah.
Now it's February. The weather's colder. Like the ball's not going to travel as far. We all know that, offenses wake up in baseball as the weather warms up also. But does that concern you at all that we've only seen the 7 homers?
Maybe a tad bit. You saw more power last night, and I don't think that's a huge coincidence because it was warmer last night than it was this past weekend. They didn't hit any homers against Omaha. I don't think they hit a single homer against Omaha the whole weekend. They didn't hit any in the doubleheader. So yeah, like it's I don't know. I think it is still like a slight concern for the team. I think Jared Jones homering last night was a good sign just to sort of get him back on the home run track. Steve Milam hit his first home run last night. But again, there has been no, I guess, obvious solutions as to where they're going to get their other, not even 20 home run hitter, like there are other 15 home run hitters on 15 homer-ish sort of hitters on this team. Like, I don't really know. I still don't have a great idea as to where that's coming. And maybe that's Luis Hernandez, but he hasn't homered yet. He's hit a couple solid doubles though. But he also hasn't played enough to like really, because they've alternated with the catchers where one guy starts one game, the other guy starts the other game, between him and Aaron Beatty. And Aaron Beatty's sort of struggled at the plate in terms of just like getting a lot of solid contact so far. Hernandez has hit the ball more solidly, I think, at least, especially last weekend. So, yeah, I mean, we'll see how that's all going to sort of shape out. And I mentioned Hernandez because he hit 23 homers last year at Indiana State. So,
yeah, and they've got 19 doubles, 2 triples. It's not like they're not hitting it. Maybe some of those fly a little farther and when the weather gets warmer, and you can start to see that. And look, they're going to be playing. Are all the games this weekend indoors? Is the ballpark in Frisco?
No.
That one's outdoors. Okay,
yeah.
so only tonight's game, Wednesday night's game, is indoors, and so we'll see. Maybe the weather warms up a little bit, but let's dig into that. Maybe this is a team, unlike a typical Jay Johnson team, maybe unlike a typical successful LSU team where they don't hit a ton of homers, but they've got some really tough outs up and down the lineup, and they're going to pitch their butt off, and it's going to be difficult to beat them because they're going to scratch across 5 runs from making contact and walking, and you're not going to get 5 runs against that staff. So maybe that's the case. We shall see how it goes against tougher competition, starting with tonight's game against Dallas Baptist. Koki, Dallas Baptist is in a similar boat to LSU. They're number 18 in the country, obviously not ranked as high, but I think they're 6-1, again facing a lighter schedule like LSU has. So in a lot of ways, this is the first opportunity for both teams to step up and see what they got.
Yeah, both teams have been pretty dominant. Both teams only have 1 loss. Both teams also have a mini meltdown, I guess. Like for LSU, it was the no hits through 7 2/3 innings. For Dallas Baptist, it was giving up 11 runs in the 9th inning of a game. They were winning 5-4 against UTRGV. They were up 5-4 in the 9th inning against RGV, Alphabet Soup. It's sort of like Indiana, Purdue, Fort Wayne, but even more complex. But yeah, they were up 5-4 in the 9th inning. This was a midweek game. And then they gave up 11 runs in the 9th, which is just like unheard of. And they lost 15-5. But other than that, they've been absolutely dominant, and they haven't really. Again, the level of competition has kind of been somewhere for them, maybe even worse, honestly. They beat. I put it down here, but they beat. They swept North Dakota State, who else is actually going to play next week, and they also swept SIU Edwardsville. Have you ever heard of that school?
I have.
Oh,
but
really?
I spent some time in Missouri. It's not too far.
That's true. Yeah. Is that
Southern Illinois?
Southern Illinois.
Edwardsville. Not the Salukis. That's Southern Illinois Carbondale. This is the other one.
I'd never heard of that in my life, I'll be honest.
See, you don't remember their March Madness run. The Salukis, their March Madness run from maybe 15, 20 years ago. You're probably too young.
I guess I'm too young to remember that.
But anyway, yeah. That's the first game. That's tonight. That's at Globe Life Field, home of the Texas Rangers. What do you anticipate the pitching plan for LSU? Because you are probably playing your toughest opponent on the Wednesday to start the week. How do you think they play this?
I would have thought they would have gone Connor Ware and Gavin Guidry and sort of like rode those two guys, but I think now is probably the right time to mention that Gavin Guidry is probably going to be out this week.
Yeah, I meant to mention that
as
earlier.
Jay Johnson said during last night's press conference, he's dealing with a mid-body injury, which is kind of a new term that I've heard. At first he said it was upper body, and then he corrected himself, said no, it's more mid-body. So
I'm going to guess oblique. I'm just guessing. Mid-body.
But at first he said upper though. Then he's like, no, it's more mid. So my guess it's probably more like a chest sort of thing, and it's not an arm injury. So
Well, that's good.
it's not.
Yeah.
It's a non-throwing, non-arm injury. So which is the good news, and he expects him to be back next week, but it's not a lower body injury because at first he said it was an upper body injury, and then he corrected himself and said it was a mid body injury, which is why I don't really know what it is.
I mean, you see pitchers.
You know?
I don't want to speculate on injuries, but I'm going to anyway, I guess. You see pitchers, twist those obliques and have problems there a lot.
Yeah.
So it could be
Maybe.
something like that. But
He was supposed to start Wednesday's game that was
Gavin Guidry.
canceled.
Yeah.
And then he woke up Thursday not feeling so good. So that's kind of the update on him. And that's important because now I don't 100% know who they're going to throw after Connor Ware in this game, and Ware only threw 3 innings in his start against Southern. My guess is they're going to stretch him out more, just given the situation that they have with this upcoming weekend and not knowing how many guys are necessarily going to be available. Mavrick Rizy is going to be available for that game, so you could there's a decent chance you see him for an inning or so. Maybe Zach Cowan throws. I think he threw on Saturday and only threw, I don't know, maybe 2 innings. So they definitely have options for Wednesday, but like who are you gonna burn and on Wednesday, and who's gonna or who do you sort of like keep fresh for the weekend and not want to burn on Wednesday? So that'll be the bullpen plan. It's really going to depend on the game and the situation and in the matchup, but with the starters, I would be surprised if it's not Connor Ware, given that he didn't pitch this past weekend. He's probably their 4th best pitcher outside of the 3 starters. And again, he's
only threw 3 innings all year. So
3 innings starting at Southern. That's it so far.
it's an important game. I mean, you're going to get plenty of chances to boost your tournament resume in SEC play, but this is the best team they play. It's
a good test.
Yeah, at least looking at preseason rankings and things like that, the best team they'll play the entire non-conference, and so it's one you want to win. It's a midweek game. The timing's odd because then you have the 3 games this weekend coming up, but this is an important game tonight. So after that, they'll take Thursday off. And
One fun fact about DBU though, so their best reliever is Luke Pettit. He has given up 0 runs in 6 2/3. You know why I mentioned his name?
Is it Andy Pettit's son?
He is Andy Pettit's son.
Look at me.
Which is interesting. And he's a righty, which is also interesting because Andy
That
Pettit
is
is
interesting.
famously a lefty.
Yeah, sure.
So, maybe he comes into the game. There's a decent chance that they get the face off.
Maybe
against
Andy
Pettit's
Pettit
son.
will be there.
There's also good the game's in Texas.
It's in Dallas, or in Arlington.
Yeah, exactly.
So after the Wednesday game, LSU takes Thursday off. Then they go up to Frisco, which is maybe 30 miles north of Dallas. It's like maybe a 45-minute drive. It's where the Cowboys have their big training facility, the Star, and also there's AA team there, the Frisco Rough Riders, which is the ballpark where LSU will be playing this weekend, and that is it called the Amagi Bank College Baseball Series? Do I have that right? No. The Frisco Classic.
The Frisco
I was looking
Classic.
at the wrong thing.
Yeah,
okay.
I think they played in that series, Kansas State last weekend.
Yeah,
That was like the
I'm looking at
Arkansas
Kansas
series,
State's
right?
schedule.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I'm looking at. That was at Globe Life Field. So Friday night will be K-State. K-State's an interesting team. Only 4-4 so far, but they've played a pretty difficult schedule.
Very difficult. Yeah.
And they started 1-3, so they played a lot better this last week. In fact, they started 1-4, and one of the losses was to North Carolina as a top 10 team. And then they turned around last weekend, beat Arkansas, beat Michigan, beat TCU. Couple of top 25 wins in there. Again, if Dallas Baptist is the best opponent you're going to play, K-State's probably right behind them.
Yeah, and them and Nebraska are kind of in a similar-ish boat as teams that have played really tough non-conference schedules so far. Maybe in an effort to sort of boost up their resumes when they get the conference play, where they don't play in as difficult of conferences, especially with Nebraska. I mean, like the Big Ten in baseball isn't amazing.
Right.
So, the Big 12 is a little bit better, but it's not the SEC. They can't afford they don't have as much of a margin of error when they get to conference play. So, and they also need to play in warmer environments. So this is why Nebraska went to Arizona in their opening weekend to play against Vanderbilt and a handful of other teams. And Kansas State, I mean, they start out the year in the Carolinas, and now they're in Texas for 2 weeks. Last week they played Arkansas. They beat Arkansas. They played Michigan. They won that game. And then they also beat TCU, which is another top 25 team. But they also had, again, like you said, they had that slow start to the year, 1-4, losses to Coastal Carolina, 2 of them. They lost to Washington, and they also lost to UNC. And LSU knows how good UNC is. Mm-hmm. So they've had an incredibly difficult schedule so far to start this season. The offense has been pretty solid for them. Seth Dardar, actually, who's from Mandeville, a Columbia transfer from Mandeville, has been their best hitter so far for Kansas State, which is actually kind of interesting. And then their pitching staff has pretty much been a potpourri of whoever. Like it's bullpen game every game for them. Like starters going a third of an inning, a couple innings here and there. No one's thrown more than 9 innings on their team so far this year. So it's gonna be very, very hard to predict who the heck's gonna pitch in these games for Kansas State. So not a very scary pitching situation for them, but offensively they definitely have some bats. And again, like they held Arkansas at 2 runs, so it can't be terrible. So they kind of have Arkansas's number. I mean, they beat them in the regional last year. They beat them this season in that game in Texas. So you can't take the Wildcats for granted for sure.
I mean, they only give up 5 runs in 3 games. Now that's a pitcher's park,
and they struggled the week before in Carolina though, so it's hard to.
They've gotten to a shootout, lost 12-9 to North Carolina. So then Saturday, LSU plays Nebraska. That game is at 4:00 on Saturday. And Nebraska's also interesting, played a pretty difficult schedule. You mentioned the big win over Vanderbilt, had a pretty good weekend out in Arizona. But then, came to Lafayette and lost to the Ragin' Cajuns 2 out of 3 this weekend, fell out of the top 25. What do you make of Nebraska?
Yeah, Nebraska's had as you said, they beat Vanderbilt. They lost to UL twice. They lost to GCU and UC Irvine as well. So it's
those are good teams. The Cajuns are good teams.
A lot of very good mid-major teams. Those are a lot of good mid-major teams that are going to definitely contend and potentially make the tournament. And they started out the year in the top 25, but they dropped out because of those losses. The problem with Nebraska so far at the start of this year is the offense. They just haven't hit the ball at all. They're only hitting .217 as a team and have a .327 team OBP. That's just not. It's hard to win games.
Yeah, in their 4 losses, they have scored 9 runs. That's not going to get it done.
That's just not going to get it done. But the pitching staff's been pretty good. So we'll sort of see how things go. And they also play pretty good defense. So no errors from positional players so far this year for them. So 2 pretty different challenges, even with 2 teams that have pretty similar resumes from power conferences. Once they get to Frisco, and then the last game's against Sam Houston. Sam Houston's struggled pretty mightily against subpar competition so far to start the season. So that's a game that they should certainly win.
On paper, that's certainly the easiest one of the weekend. So that's what's going on. 3 big games at least against DBU, Kansas State, Nebraska, and then you wrap up the weekend against Sam Houston. How seriously is LSU taking this week? It's still very early in the season. Even if you have a bad week, you've got plenty of time to make up for it in SEC play. But at the same time, it is the only opportunity you really have to make a statement in non-conference play and show that you're one of the top teams in the country for whatever LSU cares about that and Jay Johnson cares about that at this juncture. So what do you think?
Yeah, it's a good test. That's what it is. It's good. It's a good test to see where your team's at before you get into conference play and before you sort of can get back to fine tuning things against teams that you should beat again, which is North Dakota State, North Alabama, and Xavier, which are the last 3 teams that they face before the show starts with conference play, and Missouri for a 3-game series. So Missouri comes to town for 3. So. I think it's going to be important to sort of get an idea of what these freshman pitchers are going to look like against this tougher competition. Really, what the pitching staff as a whole looks like. From a starting pitching perspective, can Cade Anderson, go out there and sort of build on the performances that he's had outside of 1 inning. He's looked fantastic so far to start the season. Anthony Ianson against tougher competition, that's a good test for him since he's he's a UC San Diego transfer, so he was probably more used to pitching against the likes of Purdue Fort Wayne than he is against the likes of even a Kansas State or Nebraska. So like it's gonna be good. It's gonna be like a really good test for the pitching staff, especially given that again this is the best. This is going to be easily the best teams offensively that they faced all season. And then for the offense, we'll see. Maybe they're better against better pitching. Who knows?
That can't happen.
They haven't faced a lot of velocity yet.
Yeah.
So we'll see. It's going to be a really, really interesting week. And I mean, last year, I think going into last year's 3-game set in Houston, where they had to play Texas State, UL, and Texas, you're going into that week being like, oh, this is a good little test for them before they go into conference play, and they end up winning all 3 games and playing probably their best baseball really up until the end of the year when they finally snap things together and went on that run. So again, we'll see how this is all going to work out for them, and it's good to get out on the road and sort of, I guess, bond as a team a little bit when you're away from Baton Rouge for 6 days.
Sure thing. And I would argue these are the best 3 teams LSU will play until they go to Texas on March the 21st.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Because they open with Missouri, who looks like the worst team in the SEC, and so yeah, this is really the chance we get to see what LSU baseball has this year. Really the only early time we get to see that until we're really into the middle part of the season. So that is going to do it for us today. We will be back after the Mardi Gras holiday. Next week, we're going to preview the SEC women's basketball tournament. That will probably come your way Wednesday on Ash Wednesday, and then we will have LSU spring football preview late next week as well. So look for new episodes late next week. Have a happy Mardi Gras, everybody. Stay safe out there. Have fun. And Koki, be safe in Texas, man. Have fun. I don't think you're going to see many Mardi Gras parades up there.
Yeah. Should I throw my own mock Mardi Gras parade in my hotel room or something?
Bring some beads to the press box, see if everybody looks at you funny.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good idea.
Let's do
Bring
it.
some king cake, yeah.
All right, Alex Lee was our producer today. Our thanks to her. He's Koki Riley. I'm Zach Ewing. Thanks for watching the LSU Sports Insider.